Today, we are talking about how to massively improve the journey that your customers go on with you and your company. My guest today is Jason Friedman. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show, and you know if you've listened before that each week we get to talk to interesting entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders of all kinds of companies. We've had Netflix and Kinko's, YPO, EO, Grubhub, Lending Tree, Activation Blizzard, all kinds of interesting ones. Go check out the archives and you can listen to those. And of course, this episode brought to you by my company, Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn more about what we do at rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And my guest here today is Jason Friedman. We've been trying to line this one up for going on 4 to 5 years now, but today is the day. I'm so excited. He's the founder and CEO of CXFormula. He helps fast-growing entrepreneurial companies really get a competitive edge, largely through improving, as I said in the opening, the customer's experience. And amazingly varied background at different companies, was an entrepreneur thick and thin from a young age. And we're going to get into that in a second. And he's got all kinds of accolades. He was Ernst & Young's New Jersey Entrepreneur of the Year in business services. That's super cool. He's got all kinds of interesting companies in the Fortune 100, brands and institutions like Footlocker and Adidas and Nike and W Hotels, Universal Studios, Disney, all kinds of interesting companies that he's worked with. And in 2008, he sold his first company for over 8 figures, a massive impact. But fun fact, he started off his career as a lighting designer and roadie for music groups such as Fleetwood Mac and Peter Gabriel and Rush and some interesting bands like that, and also theater productions as well. So we're gonna talk all about that. But Jason, it first started with shoveling snow and getting snow out. And you know, it's so funny. I've asked this question of so many of my guests, and there's a real dividing line between them. Even at ages 7, 8, 9 years old, you know, a lot of times people will, you know, figure out how to make some money as a kid, and they'll just do it themselves. And then there's a whole different category, I'd say 1 out of 10 maybe, who figures out how to draft in their friends and get them involved, and then they can make money off the margin. And that's such an important lesson. You actually figured that out with shoveling snow.
It was a labor of love, my friend, a labor of love.
I've shoveled snow before. I don't think there's a lot of love involved, but maybe you do it differently.
Yeah, well, I want to bring them in, right? So yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, it was one of those things where you go out on your own and you start in the morning and you go and you knock on doors and you say, hey, can I shovel your snow? And you come up with a fee based on how long their driveway is and how many steps you have to shovel and all that kind of stuff. And kind of figure out a formula after a little while. And as you're going through and you're trying to knock on the next door and the next door and the next door, you realize it's starting to get dark, right? It's winter time. There's less light hours, daylight, right? And so it's like, how do I get through? I can't even get through like this little part of the block. I want to get this whole street. What do you start figuring out, like, how can I get more done? Well, at the age of 9, when this was all happening, 8 or 9, I couldn't go out and get a snowblower. My dad wouldn't let me. So absent that, I had to find labor, right? So I drafted, like you said, all my friends. And, you know, we started out where I'd go knock on the door. I'd ask if they'd want us to do the driveway. They say yes. And then I'd be, all right, guys, let's hit it. And then we'd just go and get that one done. Then we go to the next one, do the same thing. And then I realized, you know what? Like, I'm going to leave you guys here. I'm going to go ahead and see how many more I can get, so we know how quickly we have to go, and we'll divide. And so after I started doing that, I was just going, I was the rainmaker. I'd go, I'd, do the thing, make the deal, come back, tell the guys, send, gals, and tell them where to go. And then I'd go collect the money, walk the site, make sure they were happy. And I was managing the business and the crews, and then get them like hot cocoa, I'd go back home, make, thermoses of hot cocoa. And I was just really keeping the team happy and keeping them moving and motivated. And we were able to make a lot more money that way than me alone, and also help a lot more people, really, right? It's not just making about creating more value and helping more people. And fortunately figured that out somehow by hook or by crook at a very young age.
And you figured out the economics around it, like how much I'm going to pay my friend and, how much they're going to make, how much I'm going to make.
Yeah. And honestly, like also learned about bonusing, right? So it's like, listen, the faster we get these done, the more we make. So I'm going to give you guys an extra $5 that we split for each driver if we can get them done in less time. Right.
Yeah.
So that's right out of the box, but very quickly kind of started to figure out, how do we get done faster? How do we expand this? And at some point, like, I'm making this up because I don't remember, but we were enlisting people on multiple blocks and kind of set up the whole routine. And we were dominating. And then as I got a little older, we did get the snowblowers, and I had multiple snowblowers that we purchased, and, so on and so forth. So it was a fun little business.
And what do you think inspired all this, or how did you learn all this? Were you a child of entrepreneurs, or, the other end of the spectrum is a lot of times people I interview didn't have much money when they were growing up, and it was the only way to make some money?
It was a combination of things. My father was, I would say, entrepreneurial, not necessarily an entrepreneur. He worked in his own businesses always. He was more the operations guy that got brought in by the entrepreneur. And so he was, like I say, they were entrepreneurial. He was entrepreneurial. My grandfather owned his own firm, but it was like an accounting firm. My other grandfather owned his own, business. So I had a line of entrepreneurial people in the family for sure. And that's super inspirational. Just you see the freedom, some of the freedoms they have. But with every entrepreneurial journey, there's lots of highs, lots of lows, and the lows can get really low. And, growing up, we didn't have a ton of money. We lived fine. My parents did without so that my brother and I could have. But you felt it, you saw it. And so, like, I didn't want them to have to buy me all the things I wanted. I was going to go make some money and do it. And just always, I was just more of an independent person from that perspective, and hard work always, it was fun. Like the stuff that we did was fun. So
your first $1 million business was in college. You figured out that people needed elevated beds, and you also had a hookup because you were involved in the theater department. So I imagine you weren't like sawing wood in your dorm room, but you're doing it somewhere else, and you started making these elevated beds. And there's a great story around this.
Yeah, and this was like another one of those kind of accidental things, right? So like in my dorm room, I went to Penn State, right? Huge school, huge campus, lots of on-campus living at the main campus. And I lived in a place called Stewart Hall, right? And so it was like this narrow building with these like narrow rooms with ridiculously high ceilings. And so like you walk in the room and there's like,
you put it sideways, it would be a lot more efficient, right? Yeah.
Been there, right? So the closet on each side, a little space, a desk, and a bed, and that's it. And there's two on each side. And so, you know what? Like if our beds were up in the air, we could have a couch in here. We could like walk around. Like that'd be pretty cool. And so you weren't allowed to attach anything to the ceilings or the walls. But I was like, I could build like this kind of freestanding structure and make this work. So I went to the scene shop, I drew it all out, and I built one for my dorm room. And, I had a wood shop, right? Because I was backstage theater student. I was doing set building and stuff. So I had access that not many people would have for sure, right? And then I also had a bunch of scenic artists that like know how to like paint things to look like they could have a piece of wood look like a piece of steel in 10 seconds. They just had that skill. And so I built one, I brought it to my room, we set it up. And it was awesome. Like it was really awesome. Then we went downtown. We got a piece of carpet. We got a little love seat couch. We got like a big screen TV. At the time, they were like tube TVs.
Yeah. They were the thick ones.
Yeah, and it weighed like 1,000,000 pounds or whatever. And it was awesome. Like it was like a whole different experience. And people started coming by and they're like, "Wow, where did you get that?" And I'm like, "I know a guy. You down?" They're like, "Yeah." How much is it? I'm like, well, it's $1,200 for the base model, which is not finished. It's just raw wood. Or if you want one that looks like this, ours looked like really fancy. It had some steel. It had some like fancier wood trim. I'm like, that's like $1,600, and then if you want, we have a hookup for the couches and the rugs and all that other kind of stuff.
Oh, nice. Upsells.
Like I made a deal with the guys downtown that were selling the couches and the rugs. We get a little commission for everyone we sold. We deliver it at the use of the van or truck that they had at the scene shop. And I put all the guys to work and we just started going to town. And next thing you know, you're selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of lofts and couches and rugs and TVs even, right? Because like we did it all. There wasn't the same, and this is back in the early 90s. There weren't all the same like like Walmarts and that wasn't just that available, buying stuff online and having it dropped in. So it worked. And then like literally fade out, fade in, come back at the end of the year. One of the first people I ever sold a loft to came back to me and said, "Hey, we got to like move out of the dorms in a few days. Like, what do I do with this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Take it away." And I'm like, "Yeah, it'd be $250 to take it away." He's like, "Done." And so I thought, oh my gosh, like I should have rented these things, not sold them. I ended up calling pretty much everybody that had bought one from me and asking that they wanted removal for, $250. And I mean, almost all of them said yes. A couple of them said, no, I'm going to store it, or whatever, or I already sold it to somebody or whatever. But most of them, we ended up doing that. And then the next year, giving them, it was the same price. It was like $1,200, $1,500, but that was to use it for the year. And there was a delivery fee and a pickup fee of $100. And that covered our storage costs. And, $1 million, man. Boom.
Amazing. All right. So you're selling all these different bedding, or rather you shift from selling the bed platforms to leasing them or renting them out to people. How are you managing to do school at the same time as you running $1 million plus business?
Team. How do you do it today, right? How do you guys run an amazing business at Rise 25? If it was just you and Jeremy, how would you do it? You couldn't do it. Right? It's the same thing. It's, Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy have that book, Who Not How, right?
Yeah.
It's very much that. It's like, how do you build a team that can support you? Who are the who's that you need to be able to do what you need? And in my case, with the snow shoveling, it was my friends. Like we all wanted to have some extra spending money. We all like to go out and do stuff together. And so if we weren't playing kickball, then we were shoveling snow, and we made some money doing it and had a good time and had snowball fights. And it wasn't all work, right? There was plenty of play. And then, in college, it's like you need money for pizza and beer and whatever else. And so all the theater students, they're in the shop anyway. They love building the stuff, and like they were heroes. Like when you brought that thing in and set it up, people like thought that you were a god. Like you just made the place that I'm like living in college like beautiful.
Yeah.
Like so happy. Happy. And so we were delivering joy, like honestly, and it was fun. And
it sounds like that business really helped to kind of forge your appreciation of the value of creating a real experience for the customers. So are there any like examples of ways in which you did that? Were there little touches that you did or anything like that?
And like we teach so much now about all this that I didn't know what it was called back then. But like this idea, this concept of mass customization, right? We weren't selling one loft that all looked the same way. You could make yours look however you wanted yours to look. You could make it your own, right? You could pick your own finish on it that we'd have the scenic artist paint. You would pick the colors, you'd pick the textures, you'd pick whatever to make it your own. Like you'd pick the rugs and all that. Like you were able to take your dorm room and make it unique to you. And so like that's one of the ways that we make experience, right? We're solving a problem. Like you go to, like we talk a lot today about friction points. Like if you think about things that are like make something more difficult or are an obstacle, right? You go to college and you're living away from home. You probably lived in a slightly bigger, or even if your dorm room is the size of the bedroom that you had at home, you're now crammed into it with another person who has other friends that aren't necessarily your friends, and they're all kind of congregating, and you don't have your own space. Well, this all of a sudden like doubled the amount of space that you had in the room and gave you a much better place, a much better environment to learn, to hang out, to do your things. Like it's a massive up level. And I think you probably would understand and probably know like how important environment is, like with the things that you do. Like if you're working, I'd like to do different kinds of work in different kinds of spaces because my creative juices kind of get flowing in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I think, if you think about the journey that people have in college, we're just helping them make that journey better. And then the way that we would deliver it, like we came in with smiles and we cleaned up after ourselves and we didn't leave a mess. and we called and let them, like, we were punctual. We didn't give them like a 6-hour delivery window. It's like, oh, sit home from all your classes today because we're going to be by
Right.
like at night and, on weekends and, whatever, whenever we could. Right. But like, we just tried to be cool. You know what I mean? And we didn't know enough about all, like, how to be the most efficient, where we probably should have said, look, we'll have a 4-hour delivery window. Sorry. We probably would have been more efficient, but we didn't worry about that. Like, it just wasn't in the cards. It was really more about what was going to make it work for everybody and go from there. And
it's interesting hearing you describe this situation where it's a collaborative environment. You're working with probably friends, other, theater students that you get along with really well. You're organizing this team. You're building a recurring revenue model where you're leasing out all of these, items. Then flash forward to a couple years later, you're working with rock and roll bands, which don't generally have the best reputation for punctuality. Maybe the ones that you worked with didn't live the rock and roll lifestyle. But I'm interested to know, like, how you went from that environment when you were building the dorms to, being a roadie and lighting designer. And that's such a different environment and such a different lifestyle.
You'd think, but maybe not, right? Like, so when I went to college, my degree was in lighting design, right? I went to school to be a lighting designer, and we'll call it a tech director, like the set builders and set kind of not the design of sets, but the construction of, right? So it was like the design of lighting and the construction of the backstage type stuff. And so the loft thing, like, I think most of my business ideas have come out of trying to solve a problem, right? And my best friend Drew and I, he's been with me since we're about 5-6 years old, and he's still my partner in business now. It's 40 years later, and we're still best friends. When we were teenagers, I just remember driving down the road in my silver 1985 Pontiac Trans Am, which we called affectionately Thunder Chicken. And,
such a cool car.
It was a cool car, and I thought it was cooler back then. I tried to go back once, and it was a disaster. Story for another time. But we were so frustrated by, like, bad experiences that we had, and we just couldn't believe that, like, for the extra effort it would take to make it not be horrible, that people didn't take that effort. And our joke always was, we should make a business called Making It Better. And that's what our business is. It's making it better. Dream back then. And so if you look at all these different businesses, even the work in the rock and rolls, it's always about making it better, right? That's a through line of my life. Like, how do we make it better? How do we up level? It's in my own personal development, with my children, with my family, with my friends, with my clients, with my, my partners, like, whatever. It's, how do we make it better? And it's just on this kind of quest always to, like, have a better experience, right? And as you think about, like, the rock and roll tours, when the rock and roll groups, the musicians and the singers and whatever, when they actually show up, that's a whole different thing. But the crew, we are punctual as the day is long, and we get there, we get it up, it's ready. So whenever those jokers decide to show up, we're ready to rock and roll. And the cost for, like, the tour groups that are producing these, all that has to be dialed in. If we're sloppy and we cost them an extra $100,000 in local crew and all that, that doesn't fly. So, like, the choreography, if you will, like the fine-tuned Swiss watch kind of thing, that happens in rock and roll and in theater, everywhere else, because there's so many costs and so many moving parts. The logistics are really dialed in. Even when the show starts, every theatrical show is, like, timed down to the minute. There's all the unions and overtime and this and that, and you don't let that happen, right? And the best way to make sure that we have a consistent experience is to measure, right? And to do that right. So, yeah, the rock and roll groups might be drunk and they might roll in a little bit late and the show might be, off to a slow start, but we're all ready at the time that we were supposed to be from the backstage side. So the loosey-goosiness just doesn't exist on the production side. On the band side, that's another story for sure. And honestly, if you look at, like, all the Broadway tours and stuff, and even, like, if you look in movies and film production, it is very tightly run. because the costs and the unions and the overtime and the double time and the golden time and this, it gets so complicated. So you have to be dialed in order to make those things happen and stay somewhat reasonably on budget.
And what are the connections between what drew you to this desire to create a performance and to create a beautiful lighting design and acoustical and all that kind of stuff, and the work that you do now? Because I'm imagining there's connection between the two.
Yeah, I don't see it differently. I know it looks different on the outside, right? But I got started in this. It's another happy accident. I went to summer camp when I was growing up, and when I was when I was eight was a very foundational moment for me in my development. But I was at camp. The name of the camp was Pine Grove Day Camp, and they had electives in the afternoon, and it was mostly for the older kids, but littler kids were able to be in like the camp play. And so I was there and I met this kid. His name was Billy Grainer. And Billy wanted to try out for the camp talent show or musical or whatever it was. And he was afraid to kind of go by himself. So he's like, "Hey, would you go with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like I'll go with you." So I went there and I was sitting in the back of the little playhouse that they had. And Billy went up on stage and he sang "Happy Birthday" and, did his whole like a little audition. And while I'm sitting there in the back, there's this guy who looked just like Wolfman Jack, if you remember that character. And his name was Mark. And he was building this, like, banging wood together and stuff. And he was building a flat, like a scenery backdrop kind of thing. And I was, like, watching him. And I forgot about what was happening on stage. And I was just fixated on what he was doing. And like, he went over and he was, like, playing with a light board a little bit when they needed something on stage, or he had adjust a microphone. And then he went back to, like, building the set. And I was like, I went over and kind of sat next to him. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he was like telling me what he's doing. And he's like, "You want to help?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like, let me help." And so I started like being on the stage crew. And so I got into the show and I became one of the stage crew people. And I was moving stuff on. I was dressed in all black and, doing the whole backstage thing. And Billy became like an actor and a singer over the years, and it started a camp, and I became the lighting guy and the set guy and the sound guy, AD guy. And when I was like 13, when you become like a counselor in training at the camp, they offered to be that guy Mark's job, like just come work full time and be the theater, like the backstage guy, because I had been doing it for so long, and I was that kid in school, and I just was always that theater geek kid that did all the tech stuff and built the sets and did all that. And it became like a real passion for me. And so I did all the shows when I was in high school. Like, they'd given me keys to the high school to like let outside groups that rented the auditorium in, like, and I controlled all of that. And it just became like my thing. And it was about solving problems and telling stories and making that audience. Like, when you're in theater, you're very aware of your audience. Like, it is obviously it seems obvious, right? But it's like you are directly playing to that audience. And it doesn't necessarily correlate exactly as directly when you're looking at it, but it really does correlate. Like, your customers are your audience. And guess what? Your employees are your audience. And like, you have to understand, like, how do I create that experience for my audiences that are going to keep them engaged, that are going to keep them excited, that are going to give them that feeling of transformation. And it just kind of Mr. Miyagiing through life, like just learning it without realizing, like, at some point when it crossed over, which was like when we were building that theater and I was the guy, like, I learned all like the drafting skills and the acoustic type stuff and all the scientific stuff. But what I also had learned, which a lot of these other people that were more experienced in building theaters than I was, is I had a lot of show experience, even by 20 something years old, because I had been doing it since I was 8. And like, really thinking through like the experience from the perspective of like the touring show that's going to come through this theater. What do they need that's going to make their experience better? What does the audience need in this theater that they don't usually get? How do we maximize space so that we can maybe fit a few more seats in, but we don't take away so it's so crowded and cramped that people don't want to sit there and enjoy the show? And so, like, I just asked questions a little bit differently than I think other people might have been asking at the time. And, that it's no different than what I do now. I'm asking questions like, how do we help this customer? Like if someone joins your business and they hire you guys to help put on their podcast, I know because I've talked to you and Jeremy so many times over the years, and even like, we brainstormed some stuff over the years, but like, how do we make it a great experience for them? What do we need to do to take off their plate? Where are the friction points? What's going to stop them from having success with their podcast? And you guys have done an amazing job of really trying to take all the details and really think them through and support them, and also give them options that are, so you're mass customizing. Like if you guys really want to do this, you can. If you want us to do that, we can.
Yeah.
And so it's no different than putting on the show. It really isn't.
Yeah, I'm curious because I want to ask you about that mass customizing idea, because there's always a tension between giving the client 100% of what they want and creating something that's a system and a process and maybe a template for what you want to build. You're building bunk beds. You weren't building, double decker, triple decker bunk beds, and you weren't building, I don't know, jungle gyms inside of someone's. There are limits, in other words, to what you'll build. So how do you balance that and have the customer be happy, especially where they might have some kind of outlandish or outside of the box demand that they have for you?
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, there's always going to be a customer that has an outside of the box demand, right? And you have to decide if you want to honor that in your business or not. And if you do want to honor that, to me, if someone's saying to me, look, I want a triple decker bunk bed, or loft system or whatever, I'd say, awesome. That's going to be a $1,000 design fee. And then I'll tell you what it's going to cost to do the rest. It's not our standard process, so it's not in our standard pricing. So we'll figure it out and we'll let you know how much it'll be. But there's $1,000 to just figure it out. If you want to do that, you can pay for that, and then we'll help you figure it out. And at that point, I can give you a budget and a timeline. And then at that point, they could say yes or no, right? But it's a different thing than the normal thing I sell, right? Where mass customization comes in, like Tesla is a great example, right? You go in, they have X number of different models, and then there's different ways that you can customize what you get. You can have two-wheel drive, 2 motors, 4 motors. You can have this, you can have that. You can change the color. You can change this. You can change that. So in Porsche is the same way, right? You can really change so many different things, but there's a limit. Like you can't change everything, but you can change a lot of things, and they figured that out. And so that allows people to put their own kind of fingerprint, if you will, on their product or their service or whatever they're getting that makes it perfect for them. And so the answer is not that you should always do that, right? The answer is that you could do that. And when you do that, if you create the right boundaries, and most importantly, you set the right expectations and manage those expectations, I know it's really powerful, right? Because like Starbucks, you can mass customize your own drink. Like no 2 lattes have to be exactly the same, but you want 1 pump, 2 pumps, 1 shot, 3 shots, 5 shots. They can easily do that, and you have your perfect beverage, and it's easy. It's just the price is different, right?
Right. I want to ask you about, you end up through the theater world, through the shows, the rock and roll shows you were doing. First of all, actually, I think the last time I had a guest on that was in the rock and roll world, I asked this question: what's the craziest experience or story from the rock and roll world that you can share? And you don't have to share the identity of the band.
The craziest that I can share. I mean, some of them get so crazy that I wouldn't be comfortable sharing with a public audience. But I think the craziest was, well, it depends how you define crazy, right? There was a lot of fun times. I just think like probably the craziest thing in like all of them were very similar in that, you literally live on a bus on rock and roll tours, right? So you're on these like big motor coaches, like, you'd see people commuting in, a city near you, whatever. But on these motor coaches, they're made to be more like, campers, right? So there's bunks in the middle, there's like common areas and, a very small bathroom. And what ends up happening in the rock and roll world is you're usually in a city for 1 night, maybe 2 if you're lucky. And on the 2 nights, they put you up in a hotel for one of the 2 nights, and you get a shower. But most of the rest of the time, you're like on a bus, off the bus, into the venue, back on the bus. You sleep overnight while they're taking you to the next venue. You jump out and you do it, and it's just like this like crazy monotony. Like you really lose track of time and space. Kind of like a zombie. So that was like kind of traditional. And it's crazy in that, like, you think how important sleep is, and we're doing things like over people's heads and whatever, and you're just not getting it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a crazy life. One time, I know you're a big fan of Fleetwood Mac, right?
Yeah.
So now when I toured with Fleetwood Mac, it was a summer tour. It wasn't very long. I don't remember how many stops. It may be like 20 stops or something like that. It was a very small kind of tour, but it was also not in a good time for the band, right? They had lost.
They've had ups and downs. Yeah.
Over the years, and plenty of them, right? You probably know more about them than I actually do, to be totally frank. But Stevie had left. They had Becca as their lead singer, and they were playing like B, C, and D destinations. So they weren't like, big arenas, and they weren't playing stadiums. We were playing like bars, and like larger bars or like outdoor sheds where the seating's all out. Oh, and there's like a big kind of like roof over the stage, and that's it.
Yeah.
And we walked into this, or pulled into this one bar. It was in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And it was so small, we couldn't bring any of our gear in. Like, we couldn't bring lights in. So we took 2 sticks of truss and we kind of made this like makeshift lighting rig, something that you'd see like at a really kind of shitty bar band, like really dumpy place where like the guys got like a light board and you're just flashing red, blue, red.
Yeah.
We did our best we could. We got it all set up, and then Mick Fleetwood walks in, and he always walked in with his drumsticks ready to go hit the drums on the stage, sound check, and check his kid out. And he was so angry. He's like, like he couldn't believe that this is where his career had gotten him, and he hit rock bottom. And it was funny on the one hand, but it was tragic on the other. Like, I could only imagine having the highs and the heights. Playing all these things, and now you're in a venue that could maybe seat 200 people.
Oh, brutal.
Low ceilings and whatever. And to me, I was so young. I was like in my early 20s. Like, I was out there like living the life. Like, to me, it was super cool still. Like, I'm with Fleetwood Mac. We're in the middle of some other place in the country, and it was like, life is short, and there's lots of ups and downs, and it was just like a huge life lesson. I couldn't even tell you exactly what the lesson was, but I just felt like this gravitas of the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
He was having a tantrum, and I could feel it. Like, I felt for him, and it was a crazy moment. Like, I wasn't prepared to even understand how to process that at the time. But it's true for all of us, right? We come full circle, and we have these ups.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's good to witness that at a younger age, because we all have highs and lows throughout our careers. I want to ask you about this experience that you had. One company you're working for gave you an opportunity to basically build out an entire theater. It was located in Reno, Nevada, and it took about a year or something like that. And you struck a really interesting deal with them in order to get some upside. Very entrepreneurial of you. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so my journey was a little bit crazy. So I finished college a little early, and I did an internship with a company called Theater Projects Consultants. Richard Pilbrow, who's like a famous lighting designer, Broadway lighting designer, owned this company. And they worked with architects to, like, whenever they were going to build a theater, they would help with all the theater specific stuff that goes into the architecture. So the architect would design the architecture and the walls and the buildings, but the theater consultant would help them figure out, how do you get the right lighting positions, and where do you put the speakers, and how does the stage work, and all the mechanics on the stage. And so I got to work there for a semester to kind of finish off my college career. And then I didn't really want a desk job, so I went on and did the rock and roll thing and some theater touring. But I got bored, honestly. Like, you can only do the same show night after night. What I loved was figuring out how to get the show working and make it awesome. And then once it was awesome and on like auto, I was kind of done. So I'd like to.
Yeah.
And so in doing that, there was a company in New Jersey that I had been kind of renting all the lighting gear from for all these tours and stuff. And they knew that I had done that internship, and they got a job to build this theater in Reno and like be the consultant and provide all the equipment. So it was a big job, and one that they had never done before. So they had reached out to me and said, "Hey, you ready to leave the road?" And I was like, "By golly, I am ready to leave the road." And they're like, "Well, like, what about you leave the road, but you stay in one place? Like, we have this gig in Reno. Do you want to go like live in Reno for a year and, really kind of be the project manager on this whole thing?" I was like, "We could talk about it." So happens that I had like a 2-week break on my tour coming up. So I went home and met with them. And when you're touring with theater, you make a lot of money, right? So I was a 20-something-year-old kid. I was making low six figures and had no expenses, right? I didn't have a house. I didn't have a family. They were paying all my travel expenses and everything. I was just putting money in the bank every week. And honestly, didn't really need the money anyway, and made a bunch of money doing other stuff. So it was really about the experience. And they wanted to basically take my salary and cut it in a third. I was making. And while I didn't need the money, I also needed a little bit of a scorecard. Like, it just felt like wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be doing work for you that I'm the only person that you know that can do this work, and you're going to pay me a whole lot less than I'm making now.
Yeah.
So I said, like, look, I'll take that with a couple modifications. I goosed them up a little bit and whatever. But I said, but I want some upside. Like, how can I get a bonus? Like, if I do a really great job or whatever. And so we talked about it for a while, and they were like, look, if you can save us or make us more money than we anticipate, we'll give you a percentage of that upside. So if we are planning to make $1 million and you bring us in $1.1 million, we'll give you 10% of that extra 100,000. So you'll make 10,000.
And they're thinking this kid's, maybe he makes us an extra 50, 100K.
Or something like that. You know, like they weren't thinking it was going to be a lot of dough. And so I moved out there. I ran this project pretty much single-handedly. I mean, I used them for ordering the gear and all that, but like I was running it and just kind of sending in like work orders, like for equipment and stuff like that. And I was managing, we had a couple subcontractors that were working with us. Like, I didn't do everything, but like, you know, I was managing everything. And while I was out there, the owner of the project, Don Carano, Ferrari Carano Wineries. He had owned the El Dorado at the time. I don't know if he still does. He also owned the Ferrari Carano Winery. He took a liking to me because they were building this theater. It was his baby. And so he had my cell phone number. He'd call me at night, be like, hey, I got a bunch of high rollers. Can you meet me down at the theater? I want to walk them through. I'd get up out of my apartment. I'd drive into, you know, like I was just his guy, and, you know, he loved me. And every time he'd get a crazy idea, he'd call me and be like, hey, what if we added this? Or what if we did this instead? I'm like, let me get you a price. We'll see if it's what you want. And so I ended up building such a great relationship with this guy. I ended up selling them, you know, a hefty sum more stuff. And so look at the projected profit versus what they were anticipating to what we ultimately made. It ended up being a lot more than anybody anticipated. And they owed me basically $100,000, not $5,000 or $10,000.
Wow.
And so when the project finished, the owners were like ecstatic. They told the, you know, owners of my company, they invited them to come out for the grand opening. They were gushing about me. It was very embarrassing for me at the time. I wasn't used to like accolades or getting all those attaboys. Anyway, we fly home, and I went in to talk to the owner, and I was like, you know, I'm like, I really appreciate the opportunity. You know, I did all the math, worked out all the budgets, and it turns out that, you know, it's like, it was like $103,000 or something like that they owed me. And he was shocked. And he's like, but like, you're 22, 23 years old. I'm like, what does that have to do with the amount of money that I'm owed? He's like, you don't understand. We have to pay taxes on this money and all this other stuff. And I'm like, listen, I'm like, you don't have to pay taxes on the money you pay me. I'll pay the taxes on that. That's not a problem. He's like, I understand. You know, he's like, look, he's like, I'll give you 30 grand and we'll call it a day. And I was gutted, man. Like, I was upset. I thanked him. I took the money, and then I gave them my notice. And I just felt like I was completely abused. Like, you know,
especially after a year of working so hard.
And I did without, like, I had a budget. In the budget I had, that I could hire an assistant out there to like be with me, and that would have been an extra $60,000 or something like that. I didn't hire that assistant because I wanted to save money on the project, and I knew I could handle it alone, and I did. But then, you know, they took that away. Like, I remember he argued with me. I'm like, look, I made a deal with Avis where I was able to get a long-term rental for half the price it would have cost us to get a regular rental. And he's like, well, I would have just bought a car. You should have given me that option. You took that option away from me. And I was like, if you bought a car, then you get stuck with the car and you'd have to sell it. He's like, but I should have been able to make that decision. I'm like, dude, the budget was for like $40,000 for this car. It cost us less than 20. I saved us $20,000. Like, where's the happiness for the great job versus, and there was no talking to him. It was what it was. Like, started my business like literally 2 weeks later. I gave my notice. I started my business, and honestly, like never really looked back. But it was just another one of those moments. And I will say, like, I had one or two more of those moments where I got caught in such a similar way for just being very trusting of people. I had a handshake. I didn't have an agreement written.
You should have. Yeah.
Like, you're a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Recovering lawyer. So I definitely didn't know what I didn't know. And
I mean, you're 22, 23, you don't know these things at that age.
Very quickly, you start getting mentors and other people, and you start sharing these stories, and you figure out, like, I need help. I don't know.
Yeah.
You have blind spots, So,
So what was this inspires you into entrepreneurship or back into entrepreneurship, since there'd been a very strong thread of entrepreneurship in you from a young age. Did you have a vision for what the company would be, or is it just like, shit, I need to start making money?
So what I remember thinking, and I remember sitting at my parents' house in the backyard by their pool. At this point, they had come up with some money and they had a pool. After I left and was moved out of the house, they seemed to find money, and all of a sudden my brother had a great life. But that's fine. That's another conversation. We'll deal with my past childhood traumas later. But
we gotta only handle so many traumas in one podcast.
I know. So I was sitting out there and I was like, I really did that whole project on my own. Like, I probably couldn't have sold the project without them, right? They added a lot of gravitas and confidence to them selling it, but they did nothing and I did it all. And it was a huge success. Like, I can do this. And so I started thinking, like, what is this though? And what this was really bringing theater technology into other spaces, right? Like, because like while we were there, like in Vegas, everything's themed, right? Like, and everything's like larger than life, and Reno similarly, right? And so just looking at the restaurants that were bringing in lighting and audio and video, and the retail stores that were starting to make it be a cooler place. The .com boom was about to happen. People were starting to sell online, and retailers were trying to figure out, how do we create more excitement, more wow factor in our locations? Restaurants were doing the same. And I was like, that's what I know how to do. I know how to bring this stuff in there and make it awesome. And so that's really what the business was. My first client ended up being Universal Studios, because they knew me because I'd done a couple projects there. And they had built City Walk in Orlando, and they were having a problem with park-wide lighting control systems. So I got brought in to help them fix that.
So not a small project to start things off.
No, and they were weeks from opening. They couldn't get their final sign-offs from the city because they couldn't get all the stuff working. And I knew how to do it. And so they brought me in and we did that. And then one thing led to another. And then, I started working with Footlocker, which was connected to that Universal project, similar people involved. And you just start leveraging those connections. And, one thing, like I said, one thing led to another. And, I had a team of 40 people, not long after that, and we were doing projects.
And was it hard? That it sounds like it was kind of like project based, and sometimes it can be harder to staff up and get a team. Either you end up overspending when you are in between projects, or you end up having to let people go and hire freelancers. How did you balance that out?
Yeah, I didn't. I learned a really hard. Funny you should mention that. So we had that project, which was a multi-year project, right? Because we reopened up over 1,000 locations.
The Footlocker one you're talking about?
Yeah, with Footlocker. And John, when I tell you, I didn't realize we needed to be selling other clients, because then that project ended. I had all these people and I had no work.
How many people?
It was over 50.
Wow.
And I was paying them at the time a pretty significant salary for who they were, what they were doing, their age, the whole 9 yards. And I didn't want to let people go because I had really built a great team. And I went into a deep funk, deep depression. And that was 98, 99, 2000. And just
on the cusp of the kind of .com meltdown there.
Yeah, 100%. And just around the time of 9/11. So we were just going into 2001, and we got a couple other like small projects. We were keeping things afloat. And 9/11 hit, and it really was a defining or redefining moment for me of like, what do we want to be and how are we going to be that and who are we going to serve and how are we going to help and how are we going to contribute to the planet in a bigger way. And I had a business partner of sorts at that point that was really bleeding us dry in a lot of ways. And that was my wake up call that I needed to change things around in our business. And so I did, and we never looked back, and we went straight up like a rocket ship.
And what were those changes? What were the big changes? By the way, you okay on time? I know we're running a little over here.
I'm good if you're good. Yeah, I mean, I got rid of that partner that was really holding us back in so many ways. Like, we didn't have an alignment in our vision. We didn't see eye to eye in how to manage team and people. Not that he's a bad person. Not saying that at all. Just there was like no alignment and there was no synergy there. And really the reason that he was really there is that he was significantly older than me at the time. You know, I was still a young buck back then. And I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get those clients. Like I told you, like I knew that I had done that one project all on my own, but I didn't think I could sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still worried about that. And if you really look at the data, which I did, I was the only one that was still selling.
Mm-hmm.
I just was masking and thinking, oh, it's someone else.
And so, did you have to also lay off people after 9/11 and make those types of changes?
We didn't. We just got more serious about what we were doing and who we were doing it with and how we were doing it, and just leaned into our clients in a bigger way.
How did you manage, if you were still doing projects, how did you manage the staffing?
I was doing high level stuff with clients, more like strategy and big picture stuff. I wasn't doing day-to-day management of project work. That changed very early on. And like, so I told you, my best friend, business partner, Drew, he didn't start the company with me. So I started the company in 97. He came on in 2001, right? When I said we kind of made that, I knew I needed a different partner. And so he was living in California at the time. And so what we had done is our business was based out of New Jersey. We opened up a California location to woo him over. And then I finally got him to move to New Jersey, back to New Jersey, because we grew up there. And so he moved back to New Jersey, and we really blew up the company together. So it's the who, not how, right? Like I just need with me.
And sometimes that can be a disaster, hiring someone you've been best friends with since you were 5. Maybe you're comfortable with them, but what did he bring to the table that balanced you out?
If are you down with the Gino Wickman traction?
Of course, got a EOS behind me here. Yeah.
He's the integrator, and so
you're the visionary. He's the integrator.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that he can't do visionary and I can't do some integrator, but we try and stay in our lanes as much as we can. And, even before we were in that business, like we'd been doing other projects together, like the project I did in Reno, he helped with some of it, right? We've always been close and been doing stuff for each other. And when I had the business first, those other I told you I had no business outside of the Footlocker initially. We grew that. And when I needed more clients, I reached out to him. We were talking and he's like, I got a couple things. Like if you guys want to manage some projects that we have that are East Coast based, like I'll give them to you guys. So we were sharing from the company he was at. We were doing stuff the whole time, but then we just kind of made it more official, like come over here and let's do this.
Yeah. And you actually started some other companies before you end up selling this company in 2008. How did you manage to start other companies while you're still running this, what became a massive business?
Yeah. So partially ADD, maybe a little bit of like, false bravado and naivete. But like we had a software company that literally was software that we used for our clients in this business. So it was very related,
overlap,
if you will. And it was a whole different team, but we leaned in hard. And that company I didn't start. That company we bought and then we owned and took over the management. So we're their largest client, and it was scary that somebody else could buy them, and they went on the block to get sold. And I was like, I'm not letting that happen. So let's buy it. And so we did. It was my first real acquisition too. So I learned a whole lot in the process. We built it up, and I sold that business in 2010 after we had sold the other company. We still had a software company, and then we sold that.
What inspired the first sale, the primary business in 2008? Did a company come to you, or were you burnt out?
Neither. I was at an Inc. magazine. We had, been Inc. magazine winners for several years in a row, 2007, 8, 9. I didn't know that you had to apply for these things. So we won it. We probably would have been 2005, 2006 also. And then I sold it in 2008. So I did 2009 and then I left in 2010. So we probably would have got it then too. But they invite you to these conferences, right, that are about growth and innovation and what have you. And so I was at a conference in 2006 or 7. I'm not sure, one of the two, probably 6. And I was like in one of the breakout sessions, and I don't remember who the speaker was, but I was, a good little student sitting in the front row, waiting for the session to start, just kind of maxing and relaxing, feeling pretty cool. And I guess it was 2007 actually, because we had won the award. So it was 2007. Anyway, feeling pretty cool. We had won the award. We were badasses. And the guy gets up there and he starts talking about how he grew his way so rapidly into bankruptcy. I was like, I don't even understand what that means. And I don't remember what the title of the workshop was that attracted me to go there, but somehow I ended up in this workshop or this session, breakout session, and literally he's telling my story. And I'm visceral reaction, John, like goosebumps and like feeling like cold and like a little clammy and like nauseous. And I'm like, holy shit, we're growing so rapidly. Our growth is going to outpace our ability to cash flow the growth. And it never dawned on me. We were growing so rapidly. And I was like, our culture was about growth. Like I remember getting up in front of our team, talking about the growth and all this kind of great stuff. And I was committed to it. And I was realizing like I was going to be the one that could put us out of business. And I freaked. So I flew home on the next flight that I could get out, like left the conference, flew home, it was on a weekend. I got my team together, my leadership team at the time. And we had a heart to heart about this. And like, we had, maybe 6 months of ability to like withstand it. We had some lines of credit and stuff, but we were
break it down for me. What was the problem?
The problem was that the growth that we were having and the ways that as you get bigger clients, they're slower to pay, right? Like we were doing a big project with Bank of America at that point, which is probably 30 million in revenue, I'm guessing, if I'm recalling correctly. I could be off by 20, maybe it's 40, but it was, let's just say 30 million. Yeah. They pay not net 30, even if those are they pay net 90, net 120, net whatever they want to do, and you're stuck. And you start getting a lot of the Fortune 100s, and the payments don't come as timely, and so much volume that the outlay is so much higher. And so for a small company, relatively speaking, you have payroll, you're adding more staff, you're buying equipment, gear, you're shipping, all the expenses are getting bigger. And the timing of cash is not staying.
The cash conversion cycle is taking a long time. Yeah.
Run out of cash flow, right? So you have options, right? You could factor your receivables. If you can get someone to do that, you can try and make deals.
Credit.
You can, depends on how much line of credit they'll give you.
Yeah.
Right. Because, we had like, again, if I'm remembering, I don't know, $15 million line of credit, but we were maxing it, and scary place to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just remember going like, all right, like we have options, right? Option 1 is we can try and factor receivables and whatever, if we can find somebody. Option 2, we can slow down our growth. We can just start telling no to clients and slow it down. Talk to our clients and see if we can do something about expediting our receivables without looking like we're weak and having them get nervous about our stability and just lose the client altogether. We can go out there and find outside investment capital that will really give us the funding that we need. And so I didn't know a lot about raising money or anything like that, but we went out on the search for investment bankers and people that could help us with that. And we found a great guy, John Hennessy, really dear friend of mine now. And he helped us value the business. He helped us figure out how to put a book together for the business. He showed us all the areas that we were maybe not optimized, that we should try and get our house in order a little bit more to get more benefit. And we were going to do what they call leverage recap, right? So we were going to sell a small portion of equity in the business for some exchange equity for cash and keep it in the business, but use it to float it. We didn't want to sell the company yet. We weren't ready.
Yeah.
So we built the book. They went out to the market, and we had this crazy experience where so many people wanted to buy the company, 100% of it, like crazy. Like the big ad agencies like Interpublic, IPG, Omnicom wanted to buy us. We had
very different types of business models. What do you think drew them to you?
They wanted an experiential platform. We were doing events as well as retail stuff. Like, how do you create massive experiences for people? So it was in the store, it was at their theme park, it was at their events, and they wanted an experiential activation agency, and that was us. We called ourselves or thought of us as an agency, but we were.
Yeah.
And they wanted that, and we were ridiculous. Like, aside from the cash flow issue, the profits were ridiculously high. Like, we were a very profitable company. We just couldn't handle the cash flow cycle with the amount of growth that we were doing. And so we had a hard thing to face, like that we had to sell the company really to keep it alive, or we had to like just shut down the growth. And to me, if you're not growing, you're dying. So, and it just felt like very incongruent with everything I've ever said to anybody. So we decided that we would move forward with a sale. And
now, this was life-changing amount of money, but was there a part of you that was heartbroken, but once you came to that realization, or was it like, oh, this is great, this is what I wanted?
No, that's my identity, was so wrapped up in this company. The company was me. Like, it was my baby. It started with me sitting on the back porch of my family's house in front of the pool. And it was the thing that got me out of that other bad situation. And it was my baby. I was not prepared to sell it for any amount of money. I just didn't have a choice. Like, it's like you got to let your kids grow up at some point and go on their own. And it was like one of those, but I wasn't ready for that moment.
Yeah.
And
did you go into a funk or depression after you did sell it?
6 years.
6 years.
Literally.
Wow.
No, 6 years.
Yeah.
Wow. It was hard. I'm past it now, but it was a long time.
Yeah, that is a long time to.
I know a lot of other founders who had a similar situation, not in why they sold, but that they did sell and their identity was still connected there, even if an idea of something else, and they got paralyzed. And it's bittersweet, right? Because everyone's like, okay, you asshole, like, you just got all this money and you're
it's like world's smallest violin, right?
Exactly. And it's like, you know what? It's really not like that. And, until you've been in it, you can't really understand.
Is there anything, what, if anything, would you have done differently now looking back on it?
A lot of things. I mean, first and foremost, I would, knowing what I know now, I would not have let us get into that growth problem that we got into, where we were forced to make a decision, because I feel like we were forced to make a decision. And that to me is not really freedom. I don't like being forced into something, especially at your own hand, right? Like, I did that, right? Without knowing. But I think, really keep an eye on where your identity is and what your identity is connected to. And if it's connected to the business that way, that's probably not healthy for you. It's probably also not healthy for the business. And that was one of the things that they wanted to lock me in for a really long time. And they needed to, they should have, right? And I was locked in for longer than I was there. I left because they made the situation untenable for me. But
that's so common. You hear that really frequently after people have sold their business, that they end up leaving before they, expected to.
And like, it was like swallow the end of a revolver or leave, like one of the two, I wasn't doing that to my kids, but it was a tough time. And again, your identity, even when I was there and I sold it, it wasn't my company anymore, because they were changing things that made it's hard, because like they very much like said, like, we're buying this and we want to keep it the way it is. Like, we love what you've done. And then like, they're saying that on one side, and then on the other side, they're like, no, let's change everything.
Yeah.
And it's tough. So
you end up selling it. You end up going kind of in a funk depression for 6 years, and you end up launching CXFormula. which is really focusing on helping businesses to improve their customer experience. Obviously, something you're really passionate about. Was there something that motivated you to start a new company after 6 years? And what was that experience like of starting over again?
Yeah, I mean, I had a few other like little businesses that were not similar before that did okay, but I had a non-compete. I couldn't do anything until the end of 2016, so that's when it happened, first of all. And then second of all, one of my clients, which was Stanford University at the time, came back and was like, "We need you, we need your help." And so we came back, and we were at the time we were launching anyway. We were starting to work with entrepreneurs only, and then Stanford came back and we started doing some big stuff. And so we work with not Harvard, sorry, Stanford. Harvard was a former client. Yale, Duke.
And what are you doing for these universities? You're helping
Primarily
them with what?
raise money for their endowments.
Mm.
And funding.
So improve the experience for the donors then?
Yeah, and really tell their stories in a more captivating, compelling way that makes donors want to give. That was when we worked with Stanford. Stanford's probably like our biggest and best client of all time. I'm actually doing a project with them tomorrow. Ironically, even though we still kind of don't do that, we don't really work with big institutions anymore, but we still do some stuff with Stanford. And really, they opened up a $2 billion hospital in 2019, and they were getting a lot of backlash for the community about opening this hospital there. People were talking like it's the Taj Mahal and it's too expensive and it's not fair and blah blah blah. And they needed to change the conversation, but they wanted to like bring people through it. And so we organized an experiential set of tours that brought 40,000 people through this hospital over the course of 10 days. That changed the conversation and made it a huge win. Instead of them coming in through the front door, we brought them in through the back door. We literally brought them in through where the ambulances drop people off and told a story of a trauma patient that's coming in and why this is the only place you'd want to be and how thoughtfully it was designed with the patient care and the patient experience in mind. And we took them on the journey of this trauma patient coming in through the ER, going all the way through ICU, surgery, patient rooms, and everywhere in between. And they really got to feel like, oh my gosh, thank God this is my hospital. And that was what we wanted them to say. And that's what they were saying. It's the Taj Mahal. So
what are the common challenges? We're recording this in 2024, beginning of 2024. We got AI on the scene. It's a very different world from 2008 when you sold your baby. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing businesses struggle with, especially in this last year of rather rocky economy, in terms of customer experience and improving their customer experience? What are they focused on?
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest challenge most of us have, it comes down to a couple things. Like first is differentiation, right? Like with AI and the proliferation of AI, anybody can create, like I could go on and I could create an entire course of how to help people build a podcast in 5 minutes, and it would look really good and solid, and I could sell that. That course is not going to do justice to what you guys do under any circumstances. It wouldn't. But people can go out there and do it tomorrow. They can go out and they can build a course on what I do tomorrow, and they'll get some good stuff. They won't have the great stuff, and they won't have the relationship and the knowledge and the years of experience and that unique, what I like to think of as your fingerprint, what makes it uniquely yours that you would have. And people are starving for relationship and support more than ever before. And so I think, I've been saying this for nearly 30 years. It's like experience is the most important thing you can think about in your business. And it's more and more true. It's like, if you're not creating an amazing experience for your customers or helping them have an amazing experience, you are not going to be here tomorrow. You're just not. And we've seen it time and time again. You've seen some of the best companies in the world go out of business that had like major fans. Like, where's Blockbuster Video? How many people used to spend all their time going to Blockbuster and rent a movie? They didn't keep up with the Joneses, and now it's Netflix. And beyond Netflix, there's 4 billion other streaming services now too.
Yeah.
So what experience are you creating for people that will really last? And are you innovating as you go and not just setting it and forgetting it and hoping that you rest on your laurels that it's going to be enough? Because the world, we need to change with it. experience is not something you do. Experience is the result of all the things you do. It's something that your customers are having, and they're having an experience whether you do it by design or not, right? And so what we like to do, John, is we like to help people really get clear on what's the big set of results they want. What's going to make them rave about how great your experience was? What's going to make them renew their services with you? What's going to make them return to buy more products? And what's going to make them recruit other people to come and join you in your journey on your business? And there's an easy formula. It's not easy. I shouldn't say that. It's a simple formula, but it takes some work, right? And we help people learn what that formula is. We call it the kinetic customer formula, and how they put it into their business. And it's that journey that people are going on that it needs to be turned into a pathway, a frictionless, very momentum-induced pathway that literally pulls people through that journey towards those results. And if we spent half as much energy on the people that said yes to us as we do on marketing to strangers, and we created amazing products, amazing services that had people really loving what they just experienced and loving the results that they got, that becomes the world's best marketing. That means that when you put $1 out in Zuckerberg's pocket for a Facebook ad, you know that that's going to compound, because you know that they're going to come in, they're going to have a good experience, and they're going to tell more people. So it makes every dollar that you spend on marketing much more valuable.
And how do you gather that feedback from, how does each of these customers gather that feedback? Is it simple as like a net promoter score, NPS type of thing, sending out surveys? Is it one-on-one conversations? What do you advise in that, as far as that's concerned?
As far as finding out how it is now, you can do all those things. Like they're not mutually exclusive, right? But at the end of the day, like when you have customers that are literally posting online about you, amazing stories, and they're just referring, and they call up and they say, do you have a referral program? Like, I want to send more people to you, or how can I invite my friend to come to this too, or whatever. Like, you'll start to see it when you're doing it well. It'll show up in spades. It's like, if you look at like when you go to buy a product on Amazon, right? You look at the reviews. If people had a really great experience with your product, they're giving you stars of 5 stars, 4 stars, and they're telling you why. And if they hate it, they're giving you stars. There's not a lot in the middle, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to see the really great and the really bad. Like, what are people saying? Like, or you have a book, like maybe in your case, like somebody wrote a book on how to create the best podcast. You look through the reviews, and what are they saying is not good? And like, more of the things that people are complaining about in your business that helps eliminate those friction points, right? It's you have to be engaged with your customers if you want them to engage with you, right? So
that's a great line.
Important, but like that's asking a lot of people. Like, why should they spend their time filling out a survey, right? What are other ways that and I'm not saying that you don't. I love surveys; they're great. But what do they get if they fill out the survey? Why should they? What's in it for me? Why should I care? Has to be something that goes through your mind when you ask a customer to do anything, right? Because it's taking time, right? And the whole reason that like a business like Rise exists is you want people to basically be able to buy back their time so they can focus on the podcast content, not all the logistics and the other bullshit that makes it work, right? And so they have to feel that value. And if you're now asking them to fill out another survey or do something else,
right? It's friction.
Help me, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hired you to do a great job. Like, I don't want to have to be surveyed out the wazoo. But there's fun ways to do it where they can win prizes, or, you might have some meetings with them where you just ask them some questions and get that feedback and that data in a less off-putting kind of way.
How do we now? It seems frequently I go through some experience being a customer or something, and I see something. I'm like, how could they possibly? I just filled out this information a second ago. Now they're asking me to do it again, and just a little annoyance. My wife is always like, "What's wrong with you? Like, just do it, whatever." But I'm like, why do they do this? But the problem is, a lot of times, actually, you can tell me if this is true or not. I think business owners are removed from it, or they fail to see it. How can we, as a business owner, come through with fresh eyes and see the challenges or the friction that we've erected, and we often don't even realize exists in our business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, well, the first thing I would say is buy my program, right? Come and do our course. But in all seriousness, you have to walk the customer journey through their shoes with their lens on, right? You have to shop your experience like, and really go through it as a customer. And you have to look at that journey that they're going through their eyes and their perspective. And it's not second nature to do that, right? It takes work to actually go through as your customer would go through. So you've got to really take a step back and say, okay, how do I get into character, right? To go into my theater days, right? It's like, how does Matthew McConaughey know how to play that actor, that character? So when he's on stage, you believe that he's like this emaciated cancer patient or whatever. Like he has to know, how would they move? What are they thinking? What's going on, so that it's believable? You need to do the same thing. You need to get into the character and get into the role of your customer. And you have different avatars. You have different customers. So you have to figure out who those are and then really figure out what's going on for them. Like what's going on in their business right now that's even really getting them to do a podcast. And why is it important to them? And in a lot of cases, and I was one of these cases with Jeremy for a little bit. Like it's like I wanted to do it, but I wasn't committed to it, right? And so like it's frustrating to work with a client who says they want something but isn't committed to it, right? Like I was a frustrating client for sure, and then he got me a different way, and we worked through it. But it's like you really have to get them. And like I talk about this, like it's being interesting versus interested. If you're trying to be interesting, it's like you're teaching, you're showing, you're the dancing bear, and you're trying to like draw attention to yourself, and it's authority building, whatever. That's okay. But when you're really interested in your customers, like what's making them tick? How do I help them? What do I need to do? They feel that because you start to articulate what's going on inside their noodle in words and put to those things. And so it's so worth going down that, I'll call it that rabbit hole of really getting into their character and really looking at the journey, because the same product, like your main podcasting product that you have, it's going to have some nuances for these different avatars, and you have to be mindful. And that's where maybe that mass customization piece comes in. It's like, let's pull out this thing because customer A doesn't want that, but B and C do want it. And then this one has to come out and be a flexible module for customer D and E, And so what we do in our program, we deliver our program 3 different ways, right? One way is we have a course where you can kind of learn through it yourself and then come through some coaching. Another way is we do a 3-day intensive where you and a couple of your team members come to us, and you're in a group of like up to 10 total businesses max. And we go through your journey together. You map it, and we take it and we turn it from a journey into a kinetic pathway. And then we give you coaching for a period of time after that to help you implement the stuff. And then for some clients, they just want us to come out and really go deep with them on site. And we bring their whole team in, or a good amount of their team in, and we do that.
So it's so great that, you're walking the walk by demonstrating we have 3 different ways you can do it.
And every single one of those ways has like this meta teaching moment, right? Or like, so we are delivering an experience. We're walking the walk while you're going through it. So we'll actually be in like our online course just saying like, okay, blah, 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 blah. Here's how we're going to onboard you. Here's how we do that. And then we stop, we come back, we say, okay, let's take a meta moment. What did we just do? And why did we do it this way? So we're kind of giving you that front stage, backstage review. So you're experiencing what we're teaching you. And then we're shining a light on why we did it, why we made those choices, and how it's going to help you.
Yeah, so, that's great.
And then when you come to the intensive in person, it's, it's a more, obviously there's like a low price or a mid price and a highest price, right? But with the intensive, when you come there, we're giving you an amazing experience. We give you the meals, and we custom tailor it, and we check all your dietary needs, and we have a chef that does their things, and we go to some cool restaurants and experiences. And it's not just to be, opulent in any kind of way. It's really to demonstrate that high touch and build relationship and rapport and show how those things go. So, even if you don't do it with us, it doesn't matter. You need to do it, right? Because whoever has the best experience is going to win. That's the person who their customers are going to go tell other people. Like I see if God forbid someone puts a negative bit of press about, one of our customers up on the internet, right? They a negative review. You'll see all the other customers be like, that guy's crazy. There's no way that, they go to you don't have to comment on it. They will take those people out. They don't allow people to give bad stuff on you. And if it's something that could happen, they'll say, you know what? We're sorry that this happened to you. You should contact this person because they will make it right. And they will go to bat that way too.
Yeah.
Right? reasonable thing.
Those are truly the fans, the rabid fans that you have there. Yeah.
So your brand ambassadors, right? Those are the people that love you. And so it's super cool.
Yeah, that's great. Jason, we've gone way over on time. I really appreciate you obliging here. And I rarely go this long, but this has been a long time coming, and I love all this wisdom that you've had to share. I want to wrap up with my gratitude question. So I'm a big fan of expressing gratitude, especially to those who've helped you along the way, especially peers and contemporaries and that sort of thing. Who would you want to shout out?
Oh my gosh, the list is long. So first, my dear friend Drew, I've already mentioned a few times, but my partner in crime, he's amazing. Dan Sullivan, I think I also mentioned, was my coach for many, 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 many years. Still, I think of him as my coach. Obviously, family and friends, but in a business context, I have a couple mentors that are Napoleon Hill, for example, is a mentor of mine. Even though I never met the guy and he's been dead a long time, another important mentor. I mentioned this on a podcast with your partner in crime, Jeremy. Love Chip and Dan Heath and their books, Made to Stick, The Power of Moments. They are definitely mentors of mine. BJ Fogg, another amazing mentor.
Good Stanford guy.
Yeah. Ben Hardy, another amazing person. Jeremy Weiss, I've met a lot of great people through him. We shouted out already to Brian Kurtz, who introduced me to Jeremy originally.
Yeah, Brian's great. Yeah, we're excited to help him launch a podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm excited about everything that Brian's doing. Jeff Walker, another big mentor of mine, long time big fan. And I'm sure there's hundreds of others that I'm not naming right now. But
yeah, no, that's a great list. Jason, thank you so much. Where can people go? I know you've got a PDF that you give away and people can go check out and learn more about you.
Yeah, man, I'd love to give a free gift away. So I'm going to be a little secretive about it. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Hopefully that'll pique everybody's curiosity to go check it out. But I will say this. It is one of the absolute best strategic and tactical things that you can do. It's going to change how you view certain things in your business, and it's going to give you actionable, tactical things that you can do right now to implement it. You can't find it on our website. If you just go to our website, you have to go to gift.cxformula.com/rise25. So that's gift.cxformula.com/rise25. And they can get it because they spent time with us today, John, and I want to give them a thank you for that. And I promise you this, it will change the way you think, and you will thank me for this. And I want to hear from you. So my email address is in there. I'd love for you to tell me what you like, what you don't like, because it helps us get better. But I really want to hear how it's able to help you. And for all other things, if you're interested in any of our other programs, just hit us up at cxformula.com. We'd love to talk to you and see if we can help.
Jason, thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.